Every day, something dramatic happens in the Caribbean that affects our lives. We'll give you the details. We'll give you the facts on Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick. Host Eddie Frederick.
So glad you can join us. GECOM Secretariat in Guyana has lost the confidence of Guyana's president. This story takes the lead in our 956th edition of Caribbean Perspective for Monday, 5th October 2020. Details after this important message.
The hurricane season is now upon us, so we as Caribbean people need to remember to think safety and be prepared. Avoid venturing outside during a storm or hurricane, especially if there are strong winds. Rooftops and other debris are often blown about and can cause great damage.
Welcome back. President Irfan Ali, during a pre-recorded interview with President of the Guyana Press Association Nazima Ragoubert and veteran journalist Dennis Chabrol on Wednesday night, has said that the electoral system has destroyed Guyana's credibility internationally. The details of this report from Wendell Badri of HGP Nightly News.
The president was at the time responding to a question posed to him by Mr. Chabrol about a voters list for the next election of the country.
First of all, before you get to a voters list, you have to have a system that the population have trust in. You can't have a system where there's very little trust in that system. And the trust in the Secretariat at GECOM has been eroded significantly.
While the president has cast doubt on the Secretariat, referring to the Guyana Elections Commission, he also reminded that the system, GECOM Secretariat, is the body responsible for distributing the end product. He posited that the Secretariat is responsible for registering the population from which the voters list will be extracted. He again stressed the need to fix the system. At that point, the president of the Press Association, Ms. Ragoubert, questioned the president about whether he was perhaps overreaching his authority.
It is not overreaching. It is not. We have to fix it. It can never be overreaching when you want to protect democracy and the will of the people.
But you are a partisan beneficiary of that very system.
I am not a beneficiary.
No, I'm talking about
No, let me just make this very clear. This government is not a beneficiary of any system. This government is a beneficiary of the will of the people.
Leading up to the 2020 elections, President David Granger, along with several APNU AFC coalition members, had been insisting for a new voters list before proceeding with the election, as they had claimed that the voters list was bloated with names of persons who are deceased or who have migrated. Prior to the election and before his appointment was deemed unconstitutional by the Caribbean Court of Justice, former GECOM chairman Justice James Patterson, retired, had commenced house-to-house registration. The process was halted when Justice Claudette Singh was appointed the new chair of the body. Meanwhile, the president claimed that his government wants the system to be fixed, while further positing that the system tried to take away democracy by subverting the will of the people.
The system tried to take away the will of the people. The system tried to derail democracy. The system tried and tested our collective conviction to democracy. The system destroyed Guyana's credibility internationally. That is what the system did. And that is why we have to fix the system.
Mr. Ali further posited that in trying to fix the system, an international commission of inquiry may be needed to ascertain the loopholes that exist and make recommendations on the way forward.
That is why we said we have to get an international COI to go in there independently, bringing to us and highlighting to us what occurred, where the weaknesses are, and where the holes were.
Speaking further to the credibility of the Commission of Inquiry, Mr. Ali stated,
The COI will bring out its recommendations. Those recommendations, we have to do reforms in fixing the system, and this has to be done, as you know, all stakeholders will have to agree. But at least it is not the president who will be going and do the COI. It's an independent analysis. So if the system has to be fixed, the system has to be informed as to what the weaknesses what the weaknesses are.
Wendell Badri for the HGP Nightly News.
A couple of days ago, kind and patriotic citizens of Trinidad and Tobago were called to action as veteran comedian, producer and broadcaster ERROL FABIAN went live on social media showing he was being evicted from his home in St. Joseph by the bank, which gave him 24 hours to come up with $350,000 to settle his debts. TV6's Nicholas Luchmansingh has that story.
Trinbagonians from around the world and right here at home answered the call and raised via a GoFundMe account activated by his brother US $63,248, which translates to $424,394 TT, more than what was needed, returning ERROL FABIAN to his home and saving the Guyana TV station on Friday.
It wasn't UNC people and PNM people or African people and Indian people put money to save Guyana, you know. It's Trinbagonians do that. Yeah, it was no independent and this party and that party. And it didn't have none of that. The kind of people call me to say what you need. I get about 17 homes to go and move my family into, and about 12 business places to go and set up Guyana. Nobody wanted anything. Just go and do it and keep going.
The tearful and grateful ERROL said if 10% of that kindness could be spread to the wider population, we will be a better society, saying what he wants now is for the nation and the region to come together, and he will be working towards that utopia.
I want things to turn around nationally. I want things to turn around regionally. I want things to turn around wherever Caribbean and diaspora people are. We have work to do, and we just need to get on with it. So, eternally grateful, absolutely resolute, and not stopping until I too breathe my last breath. That's who I am, that's who you know me to be, and that's who I will always be.
Speaking on his comrade Dennis Sprangalang Hall's recent passing, ERROL said Sprangalang and his brother Tony Hall, who also passed earlier this year, did more than enough with the time they were given on earth.
Sprang's mommy and daddy had 2 sons, and they both passed this year. And those 2 sons are 2 of the most treasured sons of this nation. They have put in the work. They have gone without so that others could have. They have had sleepless nights. They had health problems. They've done over and beyond. Those 2 boys, those 2 Halls boys, they did enough for a family of 10 minimum.
Nicholas Luchmansingh, TV6 News.
You're listening to Caribbean Perspective with Eddie Frederick.
Meantime, the Minister of Health in Trinidad and Tobago, Terence Dialsing, has announced that the country is seeing a 35% decrease in the number of COVID-19 cases. Nicholas Luchmansingh again has more.
There seems to be at this time about a 35% decrease in the numbers, which is good. And I think all citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, because this is your, I don't want to use the word victory, but this is your accomplishment. Because we could not have achieved this downturn in numbers, which we hope will develop into a permanent trend, without members of the public in both islands wearing their masks, social distancing, washing their hands, staying home if you are ill.
Dr. Avery Hines, in giving his epidemiological update, presented an epidemic curve which shows the downward trend in the number of samples testing positive over the months and weeks of the pandemic.
And this just shows the total numbers of cases that would have been reported, aggregated on a weekly basis. And the important bit of this is showing the same trend line and the same shape of the trend, where we would initially have risen to a peak, and at the last couple of weeks, because this is a week-by-week graph, we have seen a week-on-week decrease of approximately 35% between week before last and now, and last week and this week. So we're hoping that that trend continues.
Asked whether this gives an indication of past behavior and outcomes, he said the data can't connect the dots.
We can see when behaviors have the desired impact and when we're not having the desired impact, and we need to encourage individuals to continue to follow the guidelines, the rules. And as you again rightly pointed out, in knowing what to do if we have another respiratory epidemic at any point in time, the adherence to the basic and simple instructions to reduce gatherings, to increase spacing, to cover faces, mouth and nose, that is.
The Minister of Health also called on persons to get their free annual flu vaccinations in order to prevent what he termed a twindemic, especially in these three categories.
We are especially encouraging the following three categories of persons to get vaccinated. 1, our healthcare workers. 2, our elderly, especially those of you with diabetes, hypertension, the sedentary ones, persons with cancer, and what we call the comorbidities. And lastly, very importantly, our pregnant women. Please get vaccinated.
Nicholas Lachman Singh, TV6 News.
An opposition member of parliament in St. Lucia and former High Commissioner to London, Dr. Hilaire, calls the Land Rover saga a witch hunt. Gina Felipe of HTS News Force reports.
Castries South MP Dr. Ernest Hilaire says attempts by the government and Customs Department to impound his London imported Land Rover is a witch hunt. According to Hilaire, as a returning diplomat under the law, he is not responsible for filing the documents for the vehicle. Earlier in the week, Straight Up host Claudius Francis revealed that Acting Controller of Customs Peter Chico was preparing a warrant for the seizure of Dr. Hilaire's Land Rover. In a September 16th letter to Hilaire, Chico calls on the lawmaker to turn in the original supplier's invoice for the vehicle. The paperwork, Hilaire says, is in the hands of the Foreign Affairs Ministry. Hilaire, who appeared on the Friday edition of Straight Up, is adamant that his customs documents are in order.
Then you had two controllers before you, both of them reaching the conclusion that there is nothing wrong from a customs perspective with this vehicle. The last controller actually wrote to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to say, for me to close this entry, there is an outstanding VAT that has to be paid. Can you proceed to pay the VAT? The PS in Foreign Affairs then, the acting PS, agreed, generated the warrant to pay it, and she was stopped. She actually wrote saying that, she was stopped from paying it. Another public official trying to do the right thing. And of course, she was transferred.
Dr. Hilaire says the time will come when the government and the customs official will have to account for their actions in the matter.
We have served notice to Chico and to the Prime Minister. We wrote to the Prime Minister and we've indicated served notice on him that we are going to file for abuse of public office and malfeasance. Because you cannot behave like that. Let me tell you, in the case of the Prime Minister, Claudius, some of the things the Prime Minister has done in relation to this matter, and you would know, the Prime Minister cannot get involved in the operations of law enforcement agencies. You cannot do that. There are Privy Council rulings on that.
The Castries South MP is also baffled as to why the acting controller keeps addressing his concerns to him and not his attorneys. The public waits with bated breath on the next development in the vehicle saga. Will the Customs Department seize Dr. Ernest Hilaire's vehicle, and if so, what will happen next? Gina Filippi, HTS News Force.
As at the weekend in Jamaica, 5 more people died of the coronavirus, bringing the total to 116. More in this short TVJ news item with Herman Green.
The 5 deceased comprise of 3 women and 2 men, all from St. Catherine. Their ages range from 71 to 99. The Ministry of Health says another death is under investigation. Meanwhile, the coronavirus case count in Jamaica has increased to 6,704. 149 new cases were confirmed yesterday. The new cases include persons ranging from 11 days to 88 years. There are now 4,386 active cases in Jamaica.
I
am Eddie Frederick. This has been Caribbean Perspective, a whole new approach to highlighting developments in the Caribbean. In the meantime, please continue to log on to CaribbeanPerspective.com for more daily news and more.